So I'm going to chat a little bit about what I do and how I did it, and then we'll have some questions for everyone. I don't have a slide presentation thing. I just prefer to have quite an informal chat. I feel that those slides make me more formal. So I'm just going to kind of talk a little bit about my journey into poetry, how I began, where I came from. It's been a pretty unorthodox route in that I've been doing this for 11 years now, and I was one of those kids who was quite disruptive in school. I actually grew up in North London, in Barnet. I went to school, QB Boys, which is a very good school, but a very academic school, and I left. I'm 36 and I'm 37 next month, and I left there in '98, and I go back and teach now. At the same school, like I teach poetry, and it's really changed in how it was when I was there. And part of it is because the headmaster, who's literally, I think he's maybe 7, 8 years older than me, so he's pretty young for a headmaster, but he believes in creativity a lot more than the guy who was head when I was there. And so one of the things that I've realised over this period is how important it is to give young people the permission to imagine. And I kind of feel that my experience in school was stifled by the fact that I was made to feel ashamed and embarrassed by imagination. I mean, working class families will know that if you are slightly eccentric or a little bit hyper, ADHD wasn't a thing when I was at school, so it wasn't something that would have been diagnosed, but looking back at it now, I think I had the propensity to kind of be slightly hyperactive for whatever reason. But I was always told to stop being stupid. That was something that I think a lot of people experience as children. You're a bit out there and you get told, stop being stupid, pack it in, sit down, behave yourself. That stupidity is what I actually use to write poems with. And I don't mean stupidity in a foolish sense, I mean playfulness. And again, it's the same thing that when you try and encourage young people to take risks with their work or to be slightly more playful, you often get this idea of this sounds stupid. And they'll write a line of poetry and they'll just say, this doesn't sound right, this makes no sense. And I kind of feel that now, more than any time, going into schools and engaging with young people and putting a poem in front of them and then being, I don't understand this, actually gives them more agency to interpret things, to participate in a poem, than what kind of me explaining what the poem means does. So one of the gripes that teachers have in the schools is that poetry isn't used as a tool to excavate the human condition, which it should be. It's used as a tool to teach literary device. And that's the problem, is that teachers aren't using poetry to its kind of full capacity. So one of the things that I try and do is when I do go into schools and prisons and all over the place, I kind of completely try and change the way we think about writing. And part of that is, again, because of the journey. I left school, I got kicked out of college, so 18, and then I worked in Pizza Hut for quite a long time, and then I went back into kind of university. I went to Westminster, I did a crash course in commercial music. I still don't know what that means. I've never used it. It was when Tony Blair just invented a bag of courses for everyone to do, so you could do like a degree in shoelace tying, whatever it might be. But everyone had a degree at some point, and also everyone was like 15 grand in debt. So that degree came with a nice fee as well. And so I didn't, basically to cut a long story short, I won the Slam Ambassadors, or it was called the Respect Slam in 2002, and it was set up by Ken Livingstone and the Poetry Society. And I ended up winning that with a poem that I wrote about respect, which was the theme of the thing. And part of the prize was that you get to go and perform poetry at the night that already existed, the pre-existing poetry night. So I went along, and I was 18, I didn't know what I was doing, I was very nervous, I was very shy, and all the guys who got up were posh, definitely not that posh, and their poems were all very funny. My poetry is not very funny. So straight away I was thinking, oh, man, like I'm definitely in the wrong room. And they got up and they read, and then I got up and I had a complete car crash. And the promoter afterwards gave me my 50 quid in a little envelope, and he said to me, there's a thin line between offending people and entertaining them. And tonight, my man, crossed it. And I didn't write a single poem for 10 years because of that. I think I overreacted, but that's hindsight. I think I overreacted. But I think there's something in that says that because I was in such a volatile and vulnerable place, the moment that you start thinking that you've got something and someone chops you down, it's enough to kind of send you all the way back again. So I literally didn't write up until the age of 28 when I got made redundant from a job that I was doing. And I decided to get back into it, but I had no qualifications per se. I had the 2-2 in commercial music. Again, your guess is as good as mine. And I started self-publishing. So I was writing these books. I actually wrote a collection called Card Not Accepted. I was 28. I uploaded the manuscript to a thing called blurb.com, and in about a week or two, they were based in the US, and they sent me back like 30 copies of this book. And I was like, yeah, this is my book. Like, my name was on there, my poem, my stories. And so I thought, I'm going to get carried away, so I saved up my dole money, and I went and I bought 400 copies of my own book. And then my girlfriend at the time, she got home one day and she saw these boxes. And I was unemployed, like I was working in one of these warehouses, just taking stuff off lorries and putting them on the shelf. And then she said to me, wow, what's this? I said, oh, these are books. Here you go. And we looked, and she went, oh, that's great. What are you going to do with them? I said, oh, I'm going to sell them. Yeah? To who? I said, someone. There's a lot of people in the world. She goes, but no one knows who you are. How are you going to, you don't have a website, you've just got 400 books that are taking up all the space. But yeah, she's got a point. I never thought about that part. I think and so I've actually still got 150. And that was in 2008. So she actually had a point. And I kind of feel that when I talk to people about self-publishing, there is like vanity publishing now, which you kind of pay 500 quid and they give you these. But I kind of feel that, for me, it wasn't a good business move, but it definitely created something psychologically that said, I can take agency over a situation and make something from nothing. Because I was essentially sitting in my front room, searching for jobs that I could not get. It was during the recession. And yeah, I kind of feel that just self-publishing, having that initiative and doing that was really good in setting that whole thing up. And then, I mean, that went on for about 5 years of me just doing odd jobs and then self-publishing. Once a year, I'd put out a little pamphlet. I found a designer who was doing the thing, and then I found a printer. And so I started doing that once a year. I was going to shows, doing more open mic nights and selling them for like 4 or 5 quid. And it felt all right. I literally just started going out, standing in front of people reading the poem, and then they'd take a pamphlet. And then in 2010, I was in Thailand, and a friend of mine who's quite a famous rapper now, he said to me, do you want to come and support me on the tour? And I was like, I don't know anything about rap music, man. Like, I can't just sit there and read poems to a rap audience. It's going to be a bit odd. And he was like, no, come along, it'll be fine. And so I did, and we went on tour for 3 weeks, and I printed up more of these books. The pamphlets actually sold better than the first thing that I did. I think because they were a 5 or the other thing. Maybe I was overcharging, but I don't know. And I think, yeah, so I kind of learned a lot about performance from being in front of a rap audience that are quite hostile as well. Like, they want to see hard bars, and I'm sitting there with a little pamphlet, reading, standing up with strange trousers, reading things, and then they kind of just think, what's this geezer doing? But I learned a lot about performance from being on tour for those 3 weeks. And then I set up Outspoken in 2012. And again, Outspoken was set up that now we've got a residency at the South Bank. And that was literally just me thinking, I love poetry, I love going to poetry nights, but why does everything have to have open mic? Because sometimes you just want to go to a poetry night and hear 3, 4 very good poets do what they do, and then you want to go home. Like, to sit and have 15, 20 open micers is a lot. And that's what I was doing, so I kind of thought I want to just change it around. And that was the concept. So we have 3 poets, 2 musicians, and that started at Proud Galleries in Camden, and then we moved to the Star of Kings, which is just around the corner in King's Cross. And then we moved to the Forge in Camden, that closed down, and then we were nomads for about a year. We were like moving from venue to venue. And then 2018, Madani Yunus, who was at the Bush Theatre, he was taking over Jude Kelly's job at the South Bank, and he said to me, how about you take Outspoken to the South Bank? What are you talking about? He was like, dude, we need to have something like that in that space. I'll give you the Purcell room, do you think? I was like, you, for real? And we were just speaking plainly in the Bush Theatre, and he was like, yeah, come and do it. And then Ted Hodgkinson, who manages the literature at South Bank, emailed me the same week and was like, we need to have a chat, I've got an idea. So I said, both these two didn't have, and they gave me, and so we did, and we moved there in May. And we've been setting out 300 people every month coming and listening to poems. And for me, why it makes me so happy is because culturally, poets are peripheral. We're always on the fringes, we're out there somewhere. Unless, Nationwide come along and give you £5 grand. Had to get that in. Unless a corporation comes along and gives you some money, but what you find, and this is quite controversial or good, is that corporations don't want poems, they want adverts. So it's a different kind of thing that poets are working on. But because most poets are broke, they end up doing the work. So it's not really a good metric to see where poetry is as a kind of cultural thing. But having the South Bank invest in what we do and allowing us to book poets that aren't just from London, that are from up and down the country, that have been doing this for 30, 40 years, that have been doing this for 3, 4 years, is really, really important. But also just to see the way that it's been received. Matthew Wallace, who manages the Poets of Faber, he emailed me and was just like, I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it. Because literally they're selling 30, 40 books a time. And for poetry, I'll give you a kind of statistic. If your poetry collection sells over 300 copies, that is essentially a bestseller. That's what constitutes a bestseller, is that. Whereas if you sell over 2,000 copies in the first week of publication, you become a Sunday Times bestseller. So that's kind of the difference between, that's basically because so much poetry gets published, not many volumes get bought. So that kind of brings it all down. So I think publishers are having a great time when you put 300 people in front of them that all want to buy poetry and invest in that kind of art form as well. And poets are happy to have an audience because a lot of the time it's pub basements or very tight literary groups where you get like 25 people, 5 are asleep, 20 are rubbing their chin, it's that kind of thing. And so people are happy to see it kind of go mainstream. So I think that's how big institutions can help benefit, get behind what we do to give platform to these kind of things. And I kind of feel that Outspoken Press, which is a publisher that I set up in 2015, the intention with that was again to try and tackle the lack of diversity and inclusion within literature, within publishing. Like, I had a lot of friends who were writing really brilliant poems, but they weren't getting a look in because of the fact that, well, to put it bluntly, they weren't white and they weren't male. And that was basically it, is that when you looked at the publishing landscape 7, 8 years ago, it was dominated by the same 15 poets that just kept going around. Same with the shortlists. Like shortlists and reviews, I mean, the LRB, London Review of Books, have got a lot to answer for. They've never reviewed a poet of colour. They've been going for 50 years. And they get told about it, and they just ignore the comments. And that's a statement. For me, that's a statement. It's just basically saying you don't want it. And I think there was a lot of research that was done around poetry publishing and who we platform and who we give voices to. So Outspoken Press was set up as a result of trying to tackle a lot of that inequality. And we've done, published 18 poets since 2015. We've got a short list, we've been reviewed, it's been really, really good. It's Arts Council funded. This is the other thing that I was going to say. None of this stuff would work without Arts Council funding. In fact, there wouldn't be a poetry scene if it wasn't for Arts Council England. The problem is, over the last 8 years, there's been £400 million cut to the culture budget, arts and culture. That's the Tories. And my thing is that when you cut budgets from the arts and culture industry, it's a form of censorship, because nothing works without that money coming through. It's also now more reliant on lottery funding, whereas before it was more treasury and less lottery. Now it's 70% lottery, the rest is coming from the treasury. And what's also interesting is that the Royal Opera House get most of it. And poor people who play the lottery don't go to the Royal Opera House because of their ticket pricing. And so there's a big issue around the way in which this money gets divvied up and who gets what and how and whatever else. I know a lot of local dance groups, WAC College in Hampstead, they lost a lot of their funding to Royal Opera House and other places like that. So I think it's important to think about how money works, particularly money in the public sector, and how it gets spread out amongst people. But I think we're doing a good thing. I think the poetry landscape has definitely changed over the last 10 years, and that's been the result of poets literally using their platform and their voices to demand a more equal playing field. There are a lot more poets of colour being reviewed. There's a lot more queer literature that is coming out. There's a lot more working class writing that's coming out. I kind of feel that the pendulum has swung that way, and I know that I hear some kind of grumbles from the white middle class men who are saying that now they're not relevant because they're not gay, they haven't experienced any kind of oppression or trauma. So now there's a kind of gripe coming from that way, and it's fine. They can have a moment of notice, because that's just that way the world works. But I kind of think we kind of haven't found that balance yet, which is fine. That's the way that this stuff goes. I don't know terms like BAME. What kind of is it conducive? I don't know if we've come up with anything better at the moment. I don't think it quite works because there's a lot of confusion about what BAME means and who qualifies as BAME and who doesn't. But again, I was chatting to my friend the other day. We haven't found another way of kind of creating these quotas. Our quotas important. Yes, right now we need quotas in order to kind of try and redistribute a lot of that imbalance. And until we find a better way of doing it, we have to stick with what we've got. So I don't think it stops here. I think we're still working towards finding a better solution. But the fact that we're active and the fact that we're doing the work that we're doing and we're using our voices to try and dismantle a lot of these inequalities and prejudices is really quite important. So that's my TED talk.